Good evening. In 1994, I went to Uzbekistan, one of those new countries in Central Asia that emerged out of the rubble of the Soviet Union. I went there to do anthropological research, for which I learned the local languages, Russian and Uzbek. It's a fascinating place to do that kind of work, although a lot of people regarded Americans as spies. And not only that, but more often they just saw us as novelties or exotic, which would often lead to a tedious series of questions, some of which were inappropriate, I thought. Assalamu alaikum. Alaikum assalam. What's your name? David. Ah, David John. How old are you? 29. Are you married? No. Yeah? Why not? Do you have a girlfriend? Yes. Do you do her? David John. Are you circumcised? How much do you make? Will you invite me to America? Will you get me a green card? Do you like Rambo? With these kinds of questions, you could understand that I would want to avoid random conversations with just random strangers. Sometimes I would use my Russian to pretend I was from another part of the Soviet Union, such as Lithuania. Anyway, I went there to study the Mahalla. The Mahalla is a traditional Uzbek neighborhood of a maze of long winding streets bordered by high walls with courtyard houses on the other side. But it's also a tightly knit community of neighbors who all know one another because they celebrate holidays together, they attend each other's weddings and circumcision parties. But people would be in each other's business all the time, which is why when after living with a family for 2 months in a mahalla, I had to get out of there. I needed my own space. So I moved to another part of town, to a Soviet apartment block, where I believed I would be anonymous and avoid nosy neighbors asking questions about, well, you know what. And shortly after that, I attended a party with some other Americans, and they were sharing some very disturbing news. Did you hear about the Peace Corps volunteer who was psych-evac'd out of the country? He had a nervous breakdown. I heard about a woman in Samarkand who was brutally beaten and raped by police. They're saying that the authorities did this deliberately to scare the Peace Corps out of the country. They think they're all American spies. Now in Uzbekistan, there's not a lot of street crime because people are terrified of the police who torture first and take bribes later. And when something does happen, you always wonder whether it's state-sponsored or whether the authorities have done this on purpose for political reasons. So shortly after this party, I was home one evening in my apartment, and there was a knock on the door. And I went to the door and opened it, and there were 3 young men standing there in their early 20s. And I'd never seen them before. And without introducing himself, one of them said, "Вы американец?" which, are you American in Russian? And I said, trying to answer as honestly as I could, given the comfort level of what I was thinking about these recent stories, I said, "Нет, его нет." No, he's not here. And then the guy said, "Well, tell him that the police have been coming by asking about his registration papers." And I said, "Ladna, передам." Okay, I'll let him know. And I was about to close the door when this guy leaned forward and he said, "You like Rambo?" I said, "Нет," and I closed the door. Well, that wasn't the end of that. A few minutes later, there was more knocking on the door, this time banging. And then I heard, and I saw the door handle being tried. Now, if that wasn't creepy enough, the next few moments were the most terrifying moments in my life. The lights went out. They had turned out the power in my apartment. Now, I don't know about you, but my only cultural reference point for that is a horror movie where there's somebody locked inside a room and someone on the outside trying to get in, trying to kill them. So I reached for the closest weapon at hand, which was a jewel-encrusted souvenir knife, and hunched down in the dark, waiting to start stabbing wildly at these three guys after they broke the door down. Well, then I realized how pathetic that would be, so I reached for the phone, picked it up, and thank God there was a dial tone, because usually in the movies there's no dial tone. And I called a close friend who lived nearby, Oleg, and I said, there are three guys outside my apartment. They turned out the lights, and I don't know what they're trying to do here. He said, oh, do you want me to call the police? They might be the police. And I said, yes, please. So he called the police. A few minutes later, the lights came back on. The police showed up. Oleg was there. The three guys standing outside my apartment were there. And the policeman said, after I explained what had happened, he said, they're just three boys from the neighborhood. I told them to keep an eye out for you, look after you. Okay, I survived that. The next morning, I was heading out of my apartment, and this woman came out of the apartment next door, and she said, why did you call the police on my nephew? Because I thought he was trying to kill me? I don't know. And she just didn't understand why anybody would call the police for any reason. But then, right after that, I had my anthropological epiphany. The woman next door, the aunt, the nephew, the three guys, all from the neighborhood, who all knew one another. The policeman coming by and reinforcing a sense of collective security and responsibility. And these three guys feeling entitled to come banging on my door and getting in my business, in my face, even in my apartment. That Soviet apartment block sure didn't look like a traditional Uzbek neighborhood, but I realized I was in a mahalla. I could live with that. Thank you.